you have everybody. We're now joined in studio. Mack Rhoades, Baylor's Director of Athletics. Yet again, we had to go through contract talks with him, but he's back.
It's good to be here. This is the first time I've been in the studio in this seat. Usually I'm sitting next to you, but that's because Craig's never here.
Yeah.
So you're always on vacation when I come.
Yeah. Just on the beach.
I mean, it's a nice surprise to see you.
Yeah, it's good to see you too.
The apple doesn't fall far from the tree, I guess. So
out there working on my golf game,
There you go.
All right, it's the summertime, so what the hell's going to happen that puts everyone in a panic this year?
Yeah, I'm not going into Mexico, I can tell you that. We're gonna play it safe, and we're gonna stay in town. So,
all right, this deal with whatever is the speculation, rumor, or thoughts about anything of a breakaway. Does a breakaway, in your opinion, with the way the Big 12 is set up, include the Big 12, if in fact there is any kind of super type league that's formed?
Yeah, I mean, right now I don't believe there's any type of conversation, discussion, in terms of super league. I think everybody's focused on the Power Four, and really getting through what's been the headlines here recently over the last 2 weeks, just the litigation that we have in front of us, and kind of this new frontier, even though we've been really in this new frontier with name, image, and likeness in the transfer portal. But it will continue, I think, here soon into the future when we think about revenue share. So I think the Big 12 is very much part of it, certainly along with the ACC and obviously the Big 10 and the SEC.
So the settlement, when it comes here, whatever happens, that puts out a fire, obviously, because that's one thing that's gone. But it does raise a lot of questions. But is it one of those things that may be more good news than bad, even though the amount of money that's going to have to be paid out, and that it will at least be able to point people in a direction of where it's going, especially ones who had been stubborn to release themselves from the old idea of what college athletics is?
Yeah. So I think a great way to look at it, right, is there is no perfect solution. But I think this stops the bleeding. And, you get hurt, you go to the emergency room, right, and the first order of business is stop the bleeding. And then afterwards is additional refinement, additional work, etc. And I really think about, maybe this potential initial settlement as giving, all of us, in the industry an opportunity to continue to move forward in a, healthier way than maybe we've been, navigating here in the last couple years. So it won't be perfect. It's not going to feel good to everybody. Change is hard, but I'm certainly a proponent of settlement and in landing in a better place than where we are today. And living in uncertainty, it reminds me of COVID. That's hard to do. And so, for me, for Baylor Athletics, we just want to know the rules of the game. And once we know the rules of the game, then we're going to go attack and thrive and do all we can to be really, really successful in whatever that model looks like.
So as you said, there's no one-all solution, and there could be further lawsuits again that upend things down the line. But this would at least give you a little bit of a reprieve, right? Of just the ability to kind of know for a little while and take a deep breath collectively.
Yeah, I think one of the things it does, right, is certainly. You're not gonna go into any settlement unless you have some type of durability, some type of protection from future antitrust lawsuits. So that's one. That's really helpful, right? And then, right, rules, guardrails, right? How to share revenue with student athletes, and I think that's going to have an impact on name, image, and likeness. And I think that is going to put some parameters around it, because it's been the wild, wild west when we think about name, image, and likeness. And so I think those things are really, really good. What this potential or a potential settlement doesn't do is it doesn't solve the employment question, right? And so that will be something in the future that will continue to have to resolve. That could come in the way of federal legislation. You know, I think there's opportunity with the settlement for there to be federal legislation that comes alongside. That still remains to be seen. It's still, right, in conversation. You know, we've got the election coming up, and so a lot of fluidity there. But there is potential for some federal legislation. And again, you know, we're going to have to deal with the employment issue. We're going to have to deal with, certainly along with that, the collective bargaining issue potentially, right? Can you have collective bargaining without employment status? You can. So, right, maybe that's a pathway when we think about, you know, protecting student athlete rights, et cetera, for those that you know, that is really, really on their mind. So it's fascinating to be in this space, to live in this space, and I'm looking forward to seeing how this all plays out, and you know, and we want to be a driver in it. You know, Baylor Athletics wants to be a driver in it, and I think with Dr. Livingstone, President Livingstone, her position with the NCAA, I think, you know, because of my time in the conference, you know, we've got a seat at the table, both within the conference and nationally, and again, I think, you know, we have an opportunity to be a driver.
I know you have a follow-up, Craig, but did I just see a note about a non-conference schedule with a team that's about to join the ACC?
You did. I mean, we want to go there, sure.
If you don't mind,
So we just, you know, completed. We've been working on it for probably, you know, 6 months. It's amazing. We're back to 6 months, right? When it was COVID, we did it in a week.
Yeah.
But now we're taking 6 months to schedule games. But we just signed an agreement with SMU, a home and home, and so you know, they would we'd go there. I believe it's in 25, and they come here in 26. So, and what's interesting about that, right, is they're now, as you alluded to it, Smokey, that they're a Power Four, and so now we'll have 2 Power Fours on our schedule, both in 25 and 26.
Very nice. When we all sit around and talk about possible solutions to all the problems at ALU, the easiest solution, it seems like on paper, is we'll just make them employees. It seems like it'd be simple. Can you explain just for all of us novices here of why that is such a hurdle and why that's not as easy as it sounds? Is it a financial thing? Can you just go into the complexities of that? Because it does seem like that's the way that you would most easily get through a lot of these issues, but am I reading that wrong?
No, I'm going to have you talk to our Vice President for Human Resources at Baylor, Cheryl Gotches. And, you know, we actually, you know, have a working group that has taken a really deep, hard look at it. And, man, I think the processing of it, right, when we think about, you know, for example, we have 525 student athletes, give or take, right, plus or minus a handful. But, you know, now all of a sudden making them employees each and every year. All right, now are they hourly employees or are they salary employees? If they're hourly employees, like what's on the clock, what's not on the clock? Who's managing that? Who's looking after that, right? What happens if they don't show up for practice or they're late for practice or they don't go to class, right? All of those things, all of the tax implications. What's taxable is tuition and fees, is room, book, board, right? All of that, gear that you wear. And so there are so many tentacles to it, so many complications. And I'll say this, you know, we've had a group of student athletes that thought they wanted to be employees. It sounded really good. And then we took them through, hey, this is what it means to be an employee, and none of them wanted to sign up for it.
I think that a lot of people, again, like, because that's the short, oh, hey, they're just be employees. They're going to be that. And, you know, this company, Baylor University, is going to take on 525 new employees. Well, just watch a game show. Like if you win a car in a game show, you don't just get to take the car. You got to pay the taxes on the car. That's the gear. And you guys give out a lot of gear because guys need it. You could tax the helmets, right, that they use and all these other things, right? So there's too much complicated things, I think, for people even to understand that it's probably not as much of a benefit as you would think, right?
Yeah, I think, can it be done? Certainly. The infrastructure that would be required to do it and do it well, extremely complex.
And the IRS is not going to help you guys, create a special thing.
Yeah, I mean, I don't believe so. Yeah. So, I mean, we have talked about it, in depth at Baylor, and can it be done? Yes. I think the driver behind employment I would hope would be, hey, protecting student athlete rights. Mm-hmm. And so back to what we just talked about previously, is there a way to do that? One, if we settle, if there's a settlement, there will be compensation, there will be revenue share, right? And then is there a way to potentially, protect student athlete rights, give them a voice, right? If there's that group of people really advocating for that, I think there is. I think there can be a collective bargaining mechanism without employment status.
Richard Carr, Buick, GMC, Cadillac, Baylor Hotline, in-studio appearance with Baylor AD Mack Rhoades on 365 Sports.
I just have one more legal question. With you as a private school, how much more unique does that make your situation? Maybe are there, I think of the National Labor Relations Board in Notre Dame or Dartmouth. Is it more unique as a private school, some of the challenges you're facing, or am I misreading that situation?
No, I think there's some uniqueness when you think about particularly a private school and the employment status and the National Labor Relations Board. So yeah, there's some uniqueness to it. You think about the USC employment matter right now, and so how that pertains to USC, a private school within a conference, and I haven't looked at now the Big Ten. It's them and Northwestern are the only two privates, right?
Believe so, yeah.
In the Big Ten, without actually looking, and how that impacts them versus how it impacts the public institutions. Now, they'll argue that those public institutions are secondary. Those student athletes are secondary employees to private entities, to the NCAA and to the Big Ten Conference, so that it does apply. So there's all of that's part of the conversation and discussion.
If you do the revenue sharing, which is happening, and all the other things that might happen, and then you have now your own department for that, the name, image, and likeness, the announcement yesterday with David Kay and others, is that on top of the revenue sharing? Will NIL be also still something athletes can get on top of revenue sharing?
So it's a great question, and let me start here. I would say, and I think this is a legitimate and accurate statement, that when we think about all of the Power 4 institutions, what is there, 70 of them now?
Something like
that, okay. I would say, I would venture that, probably 90% of them, 85 to 90% of them, the path that we are on is not sustainable for us. When we think about name, image, and likeness, what is being paid to student athletes, right? For them literally not doing anything. It's a pay-for-play model. And then if we add on top of that this revenue share, so if those both combined, right, I don't think it's sustainable for most of us. I think there's literally a handful of schools that can navigate that financially. And so when you think about the future of name, image, and likeness, if we settle, if we have revenue share, we've got to figure out how name, image, and likeness is not on top of that revenue share. And or maybe there is a carve-out for maybe commercial true NIL, like it was always meant to be, where a student athlete is actually doing something to earn compensation with a third-party commercial type business, rather than a payment from a donor to a collective to a student athlete. Again, pay for play. That we're going to have to figure out, because if we don't, if it's on top, it's not a sustainable model for any of us.
Then you just hired David, or promoted David into that position, among others. Is that because it's going to be around for a while, or is that to be proactive for whatever the future is with that?
And again, I think name, image, and likeness will absolutely continue to exist, okay? And I think it will exist within an athletic department, and I think it can exist, or potentially will exist, third-party commercial. Whether or not that's done through a collective, and or whether or not, hey, people decide to do that with their multimedia rights holder, right? We need somebody in our department that has their eye on that ball 100% of the time. And David Kay has been exceptional. And he's served in that role for probably, the last 3 months, 6 months, somewhere around there. And he's been fantastic. The volume of student athletes, along with GXG, along with John Passavant, that he sits down and meets with and explains and helps provide opportunities. We just added Haneen to the staff as well to work alongside David. So that is something we're really, really excited about. And again, we need somebody focused on that, 100% of the time.
So, with collective bargaining, without there's no union to collectively bargain with. You're just collectively bargaining if you do that with thousands of student athletes, which is even more complicated, because at least with a union, it's like this side versus this side and their representatives, and you take it back and people vote on it. It makes it complicated, but just to simplify, revenue sharing would be kind of where you'd find the payments for players like you would be doing now. And then NIL, like you said, a carve out would be separate of what it was intentionally intended to be, was, this athlete for this car dealership, and here's your money.
Yeah. I mean,
okay.
I feel like I tried to follow you.
Yeah.
Okay. I feel like you summarized it well.
Mm-hmm.
The other thing we haven't talked about is Title IX.
Oh yeah.
And how does that apply? And the answer to that question right now is we don't know. We haven't received guidance. We hope to receive guidance. But if we get to a point in place in time where there is revenue share, how we share that revenue right now, like there are no parameters. And in terms of how we do it, and how will Title IX gender equity impact that formula, we don't know. And so this is going to be, again, a new frontier. And I'm certainly hoping, when we think about Title IX, that we get some guidance before we get into this, rather than, hey, we're going to get guidance because now schools are going to have lawsuits, right? OCR is going to be sending out letters saying, hey, you're in Title IX violation. I'm hope that we can do it reverse, and we can get some front end guidance rather than back end through potential lawsuits.
Back to 25 and 26 SMU, which you announced here on the show, and I know Brent put something out, and of course SMU did too. That's two Power Fours, non-conference games. Isn't that what you want more of? Because Auburn scheduled both those years too.
Yeah, I don't know. And I say that because the whole dynamic of going to 12 teams in terms of the CFP, and so how that impacts, how that plays out. We have the Big 12 football scheduling subgroup, which I've been blessed to be a part of. We're going to begin meeting again to really think about. Right now we have a mandate that you have to play at least one Power Four. We know that we're playing, contractually, we need to play 9 conference games. So right there, you're playing 10 significant games out of a 12-game schedule. Those 2 years, we're going to 11 of 12. And so, I think it remains to be seen, and we're going to have to carefully follow it and watch it when we think about 12 teams getting into the CFP again, access. When we think about the new, the next 6 years, right? We've got 2 years, this year and next year, under this current agreement, and then the new, right? Access is all up in the air. That hasn't been decided. We think it's going to be 5 plus 7, but who knows? So I think it remains to be seen. We've got Power Fours, I believe, scheduled 25, 26, 27, 28, 4 years, right? We're holding on 29 because we want to wait and see. Pause for probably the next 6 months, see what the conversations look like in the Big 12, and then maybe get a better feel in terms of CFP going from 4 to 12.
Mack Rhoades, Baylor Director of Athletics, with us in studio at 365 Sports. You mentioned your mark and the Big 12 moving forward. I thought that when the new deal was approved, the Big 12 and how the revenue or how the big schools would get paid moving forward with the college football playoff, was there any initial blowback from directors of athletics that the Big 12 was not going to be on the same level as the SEC or the Big 10?
It didn't feel good. I mean, we're all competitors, right? And
that's kind of what he said.
We're all competitors. We're all fighting for our institutions, right? We all believe that we have as much value as other institutions, other conferences. So yeah, from that perspective, didn't feel good. Didn't like it. But it's where we are. It's the deal that we have. I think we have opportunity to improve it. We have a look in. I'm all about, Big 12, we've really got to focus on football. We know basketball, right? We can sit here and talk about that and argue best basketball conference in the country. And it's been branded that way for years. But we need to be really focused on football as well. We need to find a way as a conference to elevate football. And you think about going into this season, and I'm certainly, haven't looked in depth to the other conferences, but I would suspect when you look at the Big 12, and this is a positive but also a negative, 1 through 16, there's very little margin, right? We're all going to have an opportunity or a chance to be really good. Do we have any great teams? I don't know that we have any really bottom teams in this league, and so that makes every single conference game a dogfight. And we got to play 5 of them on the road this year, so be interesting. But the Big 12, we've got some opportunity. We've got to make sure that we improve our football brand.
Mack, most basketball off seasons come and go, and Coach Drew's name gets thrown out for this job and that job and whatever, and you guys, you can go, well, that's a good chuckle, and then you go on about your summer and live your life. This year obviously was not like that when Kentucky kind of entered the fray there. What was that like on your end, especially knowing that your great relationship you have with Coach Drew, but knowing that, a legacy program in college basketball is interested in your guy is a good thing and a terrible thing, but it for you, I know personally, it had to give you some sleepless nights.
Yeah, I think, for me personally, I was at peace throughout, whatever that was, 3, 4, 5 days, because one, really grateful for the relationship that Scott and I have, the friendship that we have, very transparent. We communicated throughout the entire process, right? We certainly talked about the Kentucky job itself. We talked about quality of life. We talked about family, all of those things. And I had great respect for the way, Scott handled it. I thought he was really thoughtful. I thought he was prayerful with his family, and again, we had some great conversation, and I think the balance as you're in the moment is, hey, doing what you can, have those conversations, be present, making sure that you're communicating, but also, like, if Scott or any head coach decides to go, you better have a plan in place. And so there's that balance of, hey, you're having those conversations. You want that individual, you want Scott to know that you love him and you don't want him to leave. But then simultaneously, you're like, if he decides, hey, God's really calling him to Lexington, boom, we got to be ready to go. And we really have to be ready to go in this day and age when we think about transfer portal. And so, that was the balance. But, man, I was at peace. And, I told what I think is really fortunate is all of the conversation was between Scott and I. And it was one time where his agent called just to really check on me, just say, hey, you doing okay? And I said, hey, absolutely. I love Scott. I know he loves me. And if he really believes that's best for his family and that's where God's calling him, then amen. But he also knows that we want him to stay and that he has an opportunity for legacy here. Doesn't necessarily have that opportunity at Kentucky. And then again, Scott and I talked about, hey, this kind of equation of quality of life plus competing for championships equals X. And, competing for championships is a pretty high market at Kentucky, but you know what? Baylor's not bad. We've won one here recently. And then, taking into consideration quality of life for him personally and for his family. And so, again, I am so grateful and thankful for the way Scott handled it and for the relationship we had prior to, throughout those 3 to 5 days and certainly now. And, Scott pivoted, once he said yes, boom, now we got to finish out recruiting and we got to hire staff. And so excited about that pivot and the new staff in the recruiting class.
Yeah, that could have been just like, who knows? I mean, just like you look around and there's nobody else in the room, even though I know you would have had a candidate immediately ready by the end of the day or whatever it might have been. With Dave Aranda, 5 or 6 months since he sat in your office on a Saturday morning and gave you the presentation. We've discussed this with you before. We've discussed it with Dave. They have gone heavy portal. They needed to. Where do you see what he has 5 or 6 months later? Not so much talent level, but where that program is with him and his new role.
Yeah, I think everything that we talked about, Dave, Jovan, myself, right? There was an article about it, day of the West Virginia game, the plan, all of that. He's delivered. He's done everything he said he was going to do. When you think about personnel, when you think about roster management or acquisition of talent, I thought they had a really, really good spring. He's not done, probably still adding, one more piece in terms of the roster as we speak. So he's done everything that he said he was going to do. And, it's been talked about. I think it's been good for him to be back in football and the edge that just naturally, organically creates when you just think about accountability for the defensive unit, accountability for the position group. I think that's extended to, accountability to coaches, et cetera. So, look, I said it before, this is going to be a really difficult league to win football games in, but he's done a great job, up to this point in time. Really like all of the staff members, like what we're doing in the recruiting space for 2025. I think that's been really positive. So there's a lot of good vibe and some momentum right now. Gotta win games.
Every day you wake up, something changes in college athletics. Every day.
Every day, yes. Love it. Bring it on. Let's go.
Keep
going.
Are you sure you want to use love? Love.
It's a strong word.
Love it.
That's a very
Okay.
emotionally attached word.
Love. Here's what I was talking to Brent as we were walking into the
Brent
studio.
Ingram, Media Relations.
Yep. Brent does a great job. Right. Makes all of us look good. But
And you're not just saying that because he's here.
yeah, no, not at all. And he's my ride home. So, I love having 20 balls in the air. I've been an athletic director since the end of the 2005 year, and I don't know that it's ever been crazier, that there's ever been more balls in the air for all of us. And so, but that's opportunity. That's exciting. Baylor, we're not trying to be like everybody. We're still going to have some uniqueness. But if we're going to do this, let's have some fun.
And I've said this before. First of all, thanks for coming in the studio. You didn't build that new football stadium. I know that was before you got here, or Foster, or the football ops, the Fudge football operations building, or what you're doing with the indoor, so you could just kind of hang out.
Yeah, I mean that was never the purpose, and I'm not one. Our staff knows it, that there's no such thing as complacency. We've got to be grinding, working, every day to be elite, to be the very, very best we can be. I'll say this: I'm really grateful that we built both the Foster Pavilion and the Fudge Football Development Center and started those projects when we did. And so grateful again to Paul and Alejandra Foster and Jeremy and Christy Fudge. But it's going to be really hard right now to build facilities in the midst of all of this conversation. When we think about revenue share, and again, I'm not confirming, I'm not denying published reports. That number of $20 million annually, right? Name, image, and likeness, how that works. It's going to be really difficult for institutions, I think, to be able to do all of that and still build buildings. And so I'm grateful that we were able to get those completed, start them, get them completed, and I think it positions us well.
We will see you in Vegas here sooner rather than later, and you are not allowed to go to the west border of Texas. You're not allowed to cross the western border of Texas at any time in the near future.
I am going to find a way to get to New Mexico, or at least enjoy some mountain air somewhere.
You deserve it. So, thanks, man. Appreciate your time.
Thank you. Appreciate the three of you.
Mac, we cross off all the list, I think, of everything you could imagine, plus some new stuff. How about the SMU story, 25 and 26 in Dallas in 25, and then also here in Waco on the 26th. This is 365.